back to another episode of The Weekly. I'm Graham Stone, joined by David Sensol. We're going to break down what's happening right now in the Middle East and how it's affecting Bitcoin and crypto markets
Graham, I
and
am
other
monitoring the
markets.
situation.
Glad you're monitoring the situation. All right, so briefly, just covering, just get for anyone who hasn't figured out what's happening. There's obviously a war in the Middle East. Uh, Ayatollah Khomeini reportedly dead. Then the Iran launched missiles and drones at pretty much every Gulf state. I think for a while they hadn't hit Oman, but then they did. And just in the last hour or so, there's reports that Israel has bombed Beirut as well. So the conflict widening in the Middle East.
Yep.
What other details do we have here, David? I know you've been monitoring the situation.
Right. So, I mean, we could just go through the kind of what's been released to the or through traditional media. In the early hours of Saturday, February 28th, the U.S. and Israel had a coordinated attack. I think the name of it was called Operation Epic Fury. That was the U.S.'s, and Operation Roaring Lion. That was Israel's. The goal, it seems, was to decapitate the regime in Iran, and it appears successful, as you mentioned. They were able to kill the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and he was also killed with around 40 other top officials. They struck over 1,000 targets in the first 24 hours and bombarded a bunch of Iran's remaining nuclear infrastructure, facilities, command and control centers. And as you said, Graham, Iran had a slightly delayed response, but then it seems that they just kind of sent drones and missiles out everywhere. So a massive wave of ballistic missiles and attack drones on U.S. military bases and even their seeming Gulf allies, right? So strikes on the UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and then in Israel, there's been reports in Tel Aviv and whatnot. That kind of brings us to the present. So yeah, that's kind of the details for the kinetic conflict, and then we can get into what's been happening, I guess, in markets and our area of the news.
Yeah, let's get into it. So, Bitcoin has been surprisingly not volatile, I would say, so far. Um, what we've seen in the past when this type of thing happens is Bitcoin sells off a lot more, and it hasn't really done that.
Yeah, it sold off like right as it happened. It sold off, but it bounced back pretty much to where it was before the conflict started. So that's where it has remained, and that's the thing that I noticed the most was the fact that it sold off, but then regained where it was. Um, this is to me this is kind of notable. I don't know about you, but I would expect this to cause it to kind of break that I would say what 60.5 um, support level, and it hasn't. Um, and notably, what when this kind of thing happens on the weekend, which is on purpose, apparently it always happens on the weekend, so it gives traditional markets, a little time to digest what's happening. Um, Bitcoin, it really does kind of gives you a preview of what market opening on Monday is going to do. And so thus far, it's been it's been rather muted, which is notable. The most interesting thing here is just the role of, I think, 24/7 crypto markets, even putting aside Bitcoin. Um, Now we have futures markets for things like oil and gold and silver, right? Like the perpetuals. And um, this is kind of, I would say, even more interesting now that we have these 24/7 crypto markets. Traditional financial players, they are also getting a preview of how these these markets that exist in mostly in TradFi will react upon opening. And so, um, again, this is just making a stronger and stronger case for um, these these kinds of crypto markets. So can I read a quote from Alexander Campbell? He had an article on this phenomena. He was also talking about some of the conflict and the effects on the Strait of Hormuz. Am I saying that correctly? Um,
Sounds right.
all right. So he said this. I just want to quote this. The future is here, and this represents a real use case for alternative financial pipes. We expect this competition is a big part of the reason that traditional exchanges are moving to start 24-hour trading. Specifically, the first thing we did upon hearing the news was to check Hyperliquid for the indicative prices for gold, which showed a surge to $5,500 an ounce before selling off to 5,300 and then rallying back a bit. And so I imagine every TradFi person did get on their computer, load up Hyperliquid, or what is it, trade.xyz, which has all the commodity stuff, and monitor the situation of oil and gold and silver. So there you have it, man.
Yeah, so Hyperliquid acting as a price discovery for commodities like gold, something that we haven't hasn't been possible in the past.
Yeah, and again, really just I heard a lot of back and forths on X over this thing saying, um, oh, it doesn't matter. Hyperliquid's liquidity is tiny compared to the actual markets in TradFi. This is useless and things of that nature. And the funny thing is, like, TradFi people were coming on and saying things like, "No, you're not being very smart here. Yes, the liquidity is bad, but you're crazy if you think that TradFi people are not using any information, any edge they can to figure out what they're going to do on Monday." And these are TradFi people saying, like, they definitely are. There's no doubt, because if you can get an edge, no matter how noisy or low signal that is, you're going to use it. And so it was funny because a lot of the haters were crypto people saying, "Oh, this is stupid. Doesn't matter. TradFi is going to eventually have 24-hour markets. They don't pay attention to this kind of kiddie stuff." And then some of these more TradFi people were like, "No, no, no. They're using it. Trust me, they are." So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. By the way, the Strait of Hormuz, right? That's where around 20% of the world's oil shipments go through, uh, is pretty much shut down at this point. There have been reports of at least one tanker being targeted. I think we have it in here somewhere. I saw images of a burning tanker. What was it? The Skylight?
Yeah, I heard that
So
it's closed, right? Like I don't know what that means in actuality, but apparently the strait is closed. So
yeah, and Maersk is now suspending all shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. The price of oil spiked to from 65 to $75 in futures trading. Currently, it's at just under $70. So you can see there's a spike up to 75. It's come off as of now, but markets in the US not yet open. Everyone's waiting with bated breath to see what will happen when the markets open on Monday.
Yeah, on some of the I've seen some clips from traditional media, and apparently some of these like big I forgot what the is it reinsurance whatever these giant super insurance conglomerates that insure these super tankers and whatnot. Apparently they've just suddenly spiked uh, how much it costs to insure these things, and apparently they've pulled some contracts on existing tankers, which is hilarious. Can you imagine that? You buy insurance, and then the insurer is like, you know what? I'm taking that insurance back. No, no, we're not going to insure you. So, already starting to have kind of these second order effects. And if insurance companies or these reinsurance companies are kind of increasing their rates dramatically, or just not not giving insurance for the time being, that will also cause um, like buildup, right? Because that'll take time for it to kind of renormalize. And I don't think these ships can sail without adequate insurance. So um, yeah, already effects of that nature too.
All right. So with Bitcoin typically acting as a, I don't know, what do you call it, canary in the coal mine for
Yeah.
markets, and in these types of situations, uh, typically we've seen Bitcoin sell off to a much greater extent than it has. I think there one of two things could be happening here. Either Bitcoin is Bitcoin's muted price performance here is indicating that we're not going to see that much volatility when the markets open on Monday, or or Bitcoin is decorrelating from markets finally, and participants are seeing, okay, Bitcoin maybe actually is a hedge here, or an asset that you might purchase in this environment.
Yeah. So that was my initial thought when I saw the chart. I think we could probably maybe take a step back and see kind of what 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 are the like major things that could or are likely to happen. So the number one thing is usually this like any kind of kinetic conflict causes a risk off impulse, right? Um, Especially around oil, right? So you'd have volatility up, you'd have oil prices spike. Um, this would higher oil prices, more volatility causes risk assets to sell off, right? And Bitcoin is usually considered a very risky asset. At least that's how it usually behaves. So you'd expect traditional markets maybe to have what gold rally like it that's happening on hyperliquid gold, silver, along with oil up, um, tech
And then,
and
yeah, risk assets like tech down.
tech down. Now, where does Bitcoin figure into that? Thus far, it hasn't gone down. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I think
So
yeah, go
it'll
ahead.
really be what happens with the markets opening on Monday. I think is that's going to be extremely informative. If markets are down a lot while Bitcoin remains kind of flat, I think that's showing that, okay, something has changed here in the market structure for how people are viewing Bitcoin. If, however, markets are market reaction is muted, equities markets reactions are muted on Monday, then it means, okay, like nothing's really changed. Bitcoin remains correlated, and it has continued its role as a canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be like the immediate kind of short-term effects. Um, I could also see a situation where, let's say, risk assets sell off hard on opening, for example. That could cause a little bit of a like forced liquidations. And I think if that happens at all, then it definitely, I'd imagine that brings down Bitcoin, right? Because you kind of want to cover and get rid of things that are the most liquid. And I imagine it would be whatever Bitcoin exposure you'd have. So I can imagine that kind of bringing down Bitcoin a little bit. So in the short term, maybe the best case scenario is that Bitcoin is choppy or flat, right? For the for the medium term, right? We don't know how long this conflict's going to last. It looks like in these early days that it's going to last longer than the last one, the last time America was in Iran, dropping missiles and whatnot.
Yeah,
Um,
when Trump issued the bomb
ugh,
Iran, that
jeez
that
almighty,
was
dude.
when was that? July?
It's crazy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Because I was going to Armenia. That was when it was in doubt. Crazy times.
Yeah, I mean, historically, what happens with these type of geopolitical conflicts is the S&P drops, I don't know, 5 to 10% in the week following the outbreak of conflict, and but within a month or so after, it ends up being about flat, and then within a year, it's up again. So generally speaking, you know, traditional markets react get like the gut reaction down, but they bounce back.
Yeah. I again, yeah. I think this would be different than some of the conflicts we saw last year, though. Iran does make a lot of oil, and Strait of Hormuz is really important. So if it's prolonged, then I think you have a risk of oil staying elevated. Now, apparently, again, I'm reading all this stuff. Apparently, OPEC Plus has indicated already that they would consider increasing supply to make up for um, the deficit of Iran. Obviously, not putting much onto the market. Still, though, if the strait is being shut down, that's not going to
Yeah.
matter that much, right?
How do you get the supply out?
Yeah, 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 exactly. So, in a prolonged conflict, let's say this goes on for a month or so, I think you really have to worry then about um, inflation increasing. So you have inflation expectations already now getting priced higher, but if oil stays elevated, then obviously I think that cause inflation, um, and with headline inflation increasing, the likelihood that, for example, the U.S. Fed cut cuts rates goes down a bit, and then that would cause financial conditions to tighten. This is also usually not very good for risk assets like Bitcoin. That's one scenario. However, I don't know if you saw this, Graham. Arthur Hayes, uh, just this morning, he released a new article called iOS Warfare. um, and in this article, he he argues that a prolonged conflict would actually ultimately force the Fed to print more money, because the U.S. would have to fund its war machine, uh, and so we just have to start printing a lot of money for that. Um, And in that case, he argues it would pump Bitcoin and gold and silver and all that kind of stuff. I think to me that's more approaching, I don't know, 3 to 6 months out, maybe. I don't know, something like that. Um, God, could you imagine if this conflict goes on that long? That's wild to me. So um, that's also a possibility, and maybe that would be good for Bitcoin too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think for the time being, I'm just going to be monitoring the situation, Graham.
Yeah.
You have something here on the Iran Bitcoin connection.
Yeah. So some people have been talking about this. So, yeah, Iran is widely cited as contributing somewhere between 2 to 5%, although sometimes estimated as high as 4% of the global Bitcoin hash rate. And that is often tied to state linked operations, running heavily subsidized electricity, mining Bitcoin for as little as $1,300 per BTC. Now, some people are speculating that with a conflict, that the conflict would actually create a bullish supply shock for Bitcoin. The argument is that if the regime is weakened or falls, forced sales of the Bitcoin they mine would end. So the miners in Iran would shift from being constant sellers to holders, and this would remove a structural source of cheap supply and create a net positive for price. That's the argument there.
What do you think about that?
Um, it's plausible.
Yeah, I mean, I think in isolation this could happen, but the other major macro forces I think would overwhelm this. You know,
Yeah.
like oil spiking and inflation and all that kind of stuff. I would just like to point out, though, we've been talking mostly about Bitcoin, and obviously that makes sense because it's kind of the overwhelming crypto asset. But if you look at total, like the crypto market total market cap, it's also been pretty flat too. So you really haven't seen crypto in general as an entire market be terribly affected by this thus
Yeah, I think
far.
this could mean that basically the bottom is in for crypto. All the sellers have already sold. There's nobody left to panic sell Bitcoin and crypto. That's one interpretation, I think. So
Yeah,
even though
that's
you have this like big geopolitical shock, there's nobody left to sell. The people who are going to sell have already sold.
yeah, that's what I gathered. Um, and I wrote about this a little bit in my newsletter last Friday, but there's been last week there were like tons of scapegoats. Well, not just last week, but like over the past 4 months, there's been tons of scapegoats about why is the price going down, and you've
Yeah,
had it
latest one
from
being Jane Street.
exactly. Last week was Jane Street. Before that, it was that secret uh, Hong Kong firm that
Yeah.
bought a bunch of IBIT, and then before that there was like CZ, and I can't. Anyway, there was like one every week. Um, but Matt Hogan had a great kind of I would say boomer dad take, which I thought was just right. It was like the reason prices have gone down is lots of people who had lots of Bitcoin sold it, and that's why. So, and I think that's probably largely true. And to your point, they're not. They've already sold all their Bitcoin, so they don't have any more to sell, right? So no one's selling 20,000 Bitcoin anymore. That's not happening. That was like a October to February or January thing, right? Um, So yeah, that it could be the case.
Yep. All right, David. Anything else to cover here today?
No, I'm gonna continue monitoring the situation. Try to work in between the headlines. Maybe spin up a dashboard or two with Claude code, so that I can have
Seeing
lots of
a lot of vibe coded dashboards floating around with
yeah,
infinite data.
yeah, lots of GitHubs with here's the best one, and so people are like doing dashboard comparisons and whatnot. Yeah, so might add my own to it.
All right. All right. Let's wrap it up there. Stay safe, everyone. Have a great week.
Yeah.